We're glad you all found it, and welcome. We're just going to get started. It's great we've got the round table format because we really hope that everybody will have loads of questions and we can get into much more of an interactive discussion. Forgive me if I'm peering around the corner at some of you. I just wanted briefly to introduce the panellists. We've got three great panellists today and a very multinational panel, I have to say. Spanish, French and German. So we're going to mix up the languages, but mostly in English. If you need French or English translation, it's on channel 3. So let me first introduce Inés Ayala Sender, who is an MEP for the Social Democrat group here in the Parliament. Our Spanish member of the panel, and who was telling me that she doesn't just have the political view, but also the business view, of course, because here in Brussels she faces many business representatives, let's say, who come and lobby her. So sitting next to her over here in the middle, we have Elizabeth Keelan. Elizabeth's German, and she is at King's in London. And has recently actually published last week in Davos, you may have seen it, some quite interesting research which we hope she will say more about. And also is the recent author of a book called Rising Stars, which you should look out for. And one of the things that Elizabeth's book has in common with Muriel here is the subject of millennium women. And we think that that could be something of an interesting conversation given some of the elements we heard in the first debate. So here on my left, I have Muriel Saint-Sever, who is French, although she's a sort of global citizen, I think, given her responsibilities as Group Diversity Officer for Mazars. So very interesting mix of business, academia, politics. We're just going to dive right in, and we thought maybe the first topic for our discussion, which is really all about women's leadership, bringing forward women leaders in the political world and in the business world. And are there things in common? Are they different? Are there things that can be learnt between the two? And how do you bring forward these women of influence in those two spheres? Maybe the first way to kick off is just to ask the panellists, what are the challenges that face women coming through into leadership positions, and what are the challenges for the organisations to help foster women in leadership? So maybe I'll start with Muriel. Would you like to say a few words?
Yes, okay. Thank you very much. I'm not going to explain why it is necessary to empower more women, because I think we all share this, but how to do it. Mazars is an international organization based in 72 countries, and I started to put on the top of the agenda gender equality when I discovered that amongst our 780 partners all over the world, there were only 9% of female partners. And very quickly, we decided that our CEO will be involved in it, and we started to work on this, choosing a strategy of influence, because we feel that having offices in 72 countries, it's not only a business issue to empower women, but it's also a cultural issue, and you have to understand the culture of the country you're working with. So we decided to choose a strategy of influence to influence our staff first, our clients we're working with, and they are having the same issues, and the public. It's why we decided to publish a book about women, a survey on Generation Y, and a survey last year on men. For me, today, it's a global social change. It's not only a business issue for some companies in a few countries. And this global change can be improved, can be done only with businesses. Obviously, we need to work with politics if we want to change mentality, legal requirement, but also cultural mindset. And what we discovered at Mazars, what I think is important, is that when most of the time our CEOs are men, when they think they understand the women wishes, they immediately think, okay, men and women are equal, similar, and the only difference is motherhood. So we will give maternity leave, we will give flexibility for these children issues. And I really feel it is part of the issue, of course, but it is not the only one. What I feel today is that the women wishes have changed, and they have similar wishes of the Generation Y, men and women all together. We conducted a survey amongst men and women from 19 years old to 30 years old in 75 countries. And we discovered that what they put on the top of what is important is work-life balance, to live in the best way his life, and to be financially independent, while their parents put on the top to be financially independent, to spend time with family, which is not the same than to live his life, it's fully, and to be happy in life. So the wishes are fully different. And the wishes of this generation are similar of the women wishes. So it's why for me it's a global social change. The second survey we conducted were about men, to understand how they feel in this world in which women are getting more and more power. Because you say that I'm a city traveler, but it's true that I realize that in many countries, even if women are still discriminated because of the sex, they are getting more and more powerful. In Pakistan, 70% of the students are women. In China, a huge number of women are becoming a number of consumers, and a number of women are opening companies. So we are going to change the world. What about the men in this world? And what is important is that they have changed their views on us. Of course, it is our revolution. So they feel now that we have modified our expectation for personal life and for professional life. So they know that, and they are sure that it is different now. When you ask the men, how do they see the women? They see us powerful, responsive, ambitious, very ambitious and very powerful. But when they see themselves, they still see them powerful, responsive, virile, protective. That means that they have changed their views on us, but not their views on them. And that's the thing we should work on in companies. But what I feel, because I'm working in a private company, that there is a very, stop me if I am wrong, but I believe there is a very important difference between women in business and women in politics. I feel that women in business are elected, and they have to achieve an issue and to solve a problem. And the more powerful they will be, the more aggressive they will be. If they achieve what they have to do, everybody will be happy. If you do that in a business, it will be terrible, because you are paid by the company. And if you show that you are too more aggressive, you will not get the next level of the ladder, because most of the men will look at you as an aggressive woman and will not give you any support. So the behavior of women in politics and in business for me are very different, and we need to learn together from each other.
Maybe that's a great, maybe that's a great place to bring in Inez, and Inez, get your view of the political world and respond a little there to some of the comments from Europe. Thanks, Mia.
Well, first of all, welcome to our house, to your house, because it's the European Parliament. And just to make you feel some feel of our diversity, I will go on my speech in French. that you need your earphones, which are just nearby. Okay? Voilà.
Okay.
Je vais parler en français. Ça va? Merci. Oh, mais c'est magnifique, alors on aurait pu parler du... Ok, merci beaucoup. Voilà. Je suis espagnol, mais ma deuxième langue c'est français, pour cela que pour vous parler, je préfère si vous me permettez. Alors, justement, je voulais un petit peu refléter un peu ce qui est le chemin, de mon point de vue, a été fait par la politique en ce qui est l'égalité des femmes. C'était par le vote qu'on a commencé la lutte, comment dire, formelle pour l'égalité hommes-femmes. Et on doit dire que c'est par la politique, dans comment dire, le débat au sein des partis et des institutions politiques, qu'on a réussi à mettre en œuvre ce que nous appelons les actions positives. Ça veut dire des lois, des normes, que maintenant, parfois, et je vois ici des jeunes, que parfois on dirait qu'ils sont, comment dire, déjà adoptés pour toujours. Je voudrais vous dire que ce n'est pas le cas, qu'il faut toujours être, et notamment pour ce qui est les égalités, les libertés et droits des femmes, il faut toujours être vigilant. Et on a commencé alors par la lutte interne, ça veut dire le vote était le premier élément pour pouvoir s'affirmer comme sujet politique, et à partir de ce moment, lutte pour les éléments des droits, les changements des lois, etc. Je dois dire aussi que dans le cadre de l'État, on trouve toujours, et on a trouvé toujours, que la capacité d'avancer, dès qu'on avait la capacité de se... Par exemple, je parle des concours pour les fonctionnaires, etc. Dès qu'on avait une vraie égalité des chances, ça veut dire sans se positionner, même comme individu, devant les tribunaux, on a vraiment réussi, pas seulement à être à 50%, mais, comme vous l'avez dit, même au-delà. En Espagne aussi, les femmes universitaires sont plus que les hommes universitaires. C'est quelque chose qui est de plus en plus courant à niveau de cette... Autre chose, c'est quand on entre dans les secteurs technologiques, les ingénieries, encore, il y a une grande différence et c'est encore là qu'il faut vraiment faire un effort. Mais normalement, là, on a réussi. Dès qu'il y avait cette possibilité de se présenter comme un numéro en disant, sans s'identifier comme individu homme ou femme, on a réussi et on a même allé au-delà. En Espagne, par exemple, à niveau de tout ce qui est les ministères légaux, les juges et tout ça, on est même dépassé presque 70% des femmes fiscales, etc. Ça veut dire vraiment, dès qu'il y a la possibilité d'être pas jugé, par ainsi dire, par les gens, voilà, hommes et femmes, alors on est vraiment capable de le faire. Dans les business, bon, là, je vois toujours qu'il y a deux éléments. Moi, je travaille beaucoup avec les transports, qui n'est pas un secteur trop féminin, mais que finalement, nous sommes aussi capables d'y entrer, et on voit le même. Ça veut dire, dans ce qui était les entreprises publiques, normalement, au transport, il y avait toujours des femmes qui étaient capables, ça veut dire qui ont fait vraiment son boulot. Dès qu'on entre dans la partie privée, on commence à trouver des autres problèmes. Du coup, on doit vraiment foncer ou avancer dans des lois et des normes pour faire que tous les pas en avant ne soient pas en arrière. Donc là, dans les entreprises, je trouve qu'il y a deux éléments de lecture. Une, c'est les grandes entreprises, les grandes corporations, où on commence à faire le chemin, mais encore trop petit à petit. C'est pour cela que les normes et les lois, pour avoir une action positive, comme celle que la commissaire Viviane Reding nous proposait, c'est énormément important. Parce que, encore, comme vous disiez, il y a différents groupes, et les hommes nous voient encore comme, dans certains secteurs, comme une menace, parce que de plus en plus, nous sommes capables, dès qu'on est là, vraiment à réussir et même à, comment dire, pacifier le terrain. Du coup, on devient plus productif, on devient, comment dire, on prend ensemble tout l'entourage, on a un cadre plus ample, on compte avec tout le monde, du haut en bas et de bas en haut. C'est-à-dire qu'on a, par culture, je ne dis pas, moi, je suis totalement convaincu que vraiment, il y a deux cultures et c'est très important. C'est pour ça que je suis optimiste, parce que la culture, on peut changer. C'est-à-dire on peut vraiment travailler pour le changement. Et là, il y a, comment dire, dans les grandes corporations, et encore plus dans le corps de notre actuelle société, où il y a l'économique, c'est vraiment pris la grande partie, on trouve vraiment qu'il y a des endroits où sont encore fermés. Par exemple, je venais justement, parce que j'étais très impressionné, des cas maintenant des femmes, il y avait quelques Espagnols, mais aussi de tous les pays, que dans la city ou dans le street, ils sont capables, comment dire, de commencer à dénoncer le grand sexisme et vraiment la discrimination faramineuse qu'il y a encore dans ces cœurs de notre société qu'il faudrait vraiment arriver à enlever. Il y a eu des arrêts actuels où on voit des femmes très jeunes, hein, de 28 à 42 ans, qui ont dénoncé et dont on voit encore, et ça c'est ce qui me frappe énormément, que malgré qu'ils ont un arrêt en faveur, contre le banque ou la société broker, etc., qui dont leurs compagnons, vraiment, c'était vraiment une guerre à l'intérieur, leur carrière est tranchée. Ça veut dire, ils savent pour le moment, ce sont les pionnières. C'est pour ça que je trouve que c'est très important de pouvoir, dans des forums comme celui-là, faire une action positive pour les accompagner. Parce que je trouve que là, parfois, ils sont aussi très seuls. Hein, Alors, je trouve que là, d'autre part, quand il y a la crise, quand il y a les États ou les pays en sous-développement, dans la guerre, on appelle toujours les femmes, via les microcrédits, via l'entrepreneuriat de type social, via l'économie dans son expression la plus petite mais la plus courageuse, on les appelle justement à gérer cette économie en crise. Et on le voit de plus en plus chez nous, justement, les entrepreneurs sont plus femmes que hommes, malgré que la crise a frappé plus hommes que les femmes pour le moment. Dans les services publics et autres, c'est différent. Hein. Mais là, on a justement, dans l'économie, dans la partie, entreprise, on voit toujours ces deux éléments. Dans les grands, il y a encore des remparts énormes qu'il faut ouvrir, qu'il faut vraiment, et accompagner ces femmes qui sont les pionnières dans des situations énormément difficiles, où leurs carrières sont vraiment mises très jeunes en plus, et d'autre part, ces autres femmes qui sont l'économie, quand il y a la crise, quand il y a le désarroi, justement, qui sont capables de rétisser encore à nouveau l'économie. Donc je trouve que c'est là où nous sommes vraiment dans un débat. Moi, je suis toujours, sinon je ne serais pas femme politique, optimiste, et j'ai commencé dans la carrière politique justement à travers le mouvement en faveur des droits des femmes. Parce que je trouve que c'est là où il y a les germes du meilleur pour la politique et aussi pour l'économie.
Et je crois que l'optimisme, c'est un bon moment d'introduire Elizabeth, and with the positive thing, get you to maybe just respond a little bit also to what the two other panelists have said and come in with some of the findings. I think also, wasn't it an interesting point to hear that in a way women have been successful by being anonymous, by being a number? I thought that was just an interesting thing. I never thought of that.
But not being identified as women. I think this is the women against men. I think that's you're right. This is interesting.
Thank you. Well, I mean, it's difficult to add anything new to that debate. I mean, just to summarize where we are, politics and business, quite different fields. However, they do share something in common, and that's what I've summarized in my research as the 50-30-10 rule. You know, you start out having more women around, and then somehow the more senior the position becomes, the less and less you have. And there are certain mechanisms to try to avoid that, and we have heard a lot about the quota and how that can challenge inequality and so on. But what my research is on is much more the pipeline, as it is called in the business world, the younger women and how they move through their experiences in the workplace. Because what we need to keep in mind is that the young women who are like 20 to 30, 35 today have grown up in a time where gender is quite different to before. Before, they really had to struggle. It was what we call gender discrimination 1.0, the traditional form, and it hasn't gone away, right? There's still a lot of very traditional gender discrimination happening, but actually nowadays it's much more subtle and much more difficult to grasp. So where the law is not as effective to deal with those things, and that's why the organizations do unconscious bias awareness training and so on and so forth. So my research was about finding, kind of an answer to the question, how can we make the pipeline truly sustainable? not in the sense as, yes, we kind of modify it right at the top, so certain mechanisms, but also we need to ensure that the women today who are young and enter politics or the workplace, and what can we do to support them? And the problem you face with this generation is that they tell you, oh, we don't need this type of stuff anymore, right? That is not relevant for us. I've been teaching, students at King's College London for a number of years now, and there's kind of this sentiment that, gender inequality is so yesterday, our mothers and grandmothers had to, suffer from it, but today that no longer happens. And that has incredibly positive effects. If you look at young women today, we see that the confidence levels are the same amongst men and women, right? So for the young generations, traditional idea that confidence of women is lower no longer holds true. Additionally, research finds that young women want to lead. They have the same level of leadership aspirations as their male peers. So again, that's also a difference. Before you could always get away with, women just don't want to lead, and they just don't want to be in those positions. So while we have this golden opportunity to make true sustainable changes happen in any kind of situations, at the same time we still see that women do question themselves more, particularly when things go not so well. And the problem and danger with that is as you make experiences that might be described as gender discrimination or some form of gender inequality, you're no longer able to recognize this, and instead you think, oh, it's just me. I'm not good enough. I'm not, adaptable enough. I just can't succeed because of me as an individual, rather than looking at it from a systemic level and saying, well, even though gender inequality has changed, it still hasn't gone away. And I think that is where we need to start thinking about how we can motivate those young women to realize those challenges that they're going to confront. And obviously the traditional idea of role models and mentors and sponsors, they do have a role to play in that. But what you very often find is that young women are more hesitant to identify with more senior women. When I did my research, I was surprised by how many negative emotions these younger women had towards older women. The queen bee idea that older women not support younger women and things like that. So what I encourage in my work the younger women to do is to actually say, well, don't look for the perfect role model who's done everything like you wanted to do, but actually to find composite role models. As we know, normally role models are constructed anyway. So pick elements from people that you admire and integrate that into your own self-concept. But there's only so much you can do to really support young women if the organizations in which they enter and which they want to succeed don't change. Right? And for now we see that we have the first generation of CEOs of private sector companies who are asked to make changes in regards to gender equality. Right? So they suddenly have to lead on those issues, which traditionally were not in the remit of the CEO. You would have a diversity and inclusion person maybe who was in charge, but increasingly we see that CEOs do take leadership, and that is the second report that Julia mentioned that just came out last week, which explores how CEOs can actually lead the way and how can they support changing their organizations. And we know that CEOs are incredibly important. What they say and do has a role modeling function within the organization. And what we found in this research is that very often the CEOs, very global sample, were inclined to talk about the business case. Why it is important from a business perspective to have more women. They often came out with very traditional views on why they wanted more women, which are, by the way, highly stereotypical too. And then they would talk a bit about the social imperative for having more women, but what we found was only present in very few instances was their personal motivation for making change happen. But looking at what really made a difference are those personal narratives that the CEOs brought forward. Why are they motivated to make change happen? And that can be quite different from having daughters to having read a specific book that motivated them to take action. But if they then adopt a much more emotional and personal response, that potentially can help organizations to facilitate this important cultural change where we can no longer just ask women to adapt to systems and structures that were designed not with them in mind, but where we actually start to break that up and we take the people who shape those organizations into responsibility.
So there's some common ideas coming out here. Importance of you mentioned too, the CEO as the sort of leader and very involved with change. And I think it's the same, for a political figure in terms of leading a campaign in the political world. Let's just turn things open to the floor. You guys have been listening long enough. What questions do you have, and what sort of areas would you like to explore a bit with the panel? Who's going to start us off? Can't be shy. No? All right. Yes, great. Thank you. Could you just tell us who you are and
yes, of course.
The background?
Constance speaking. I'm with EU China Link. One issue I always have in mind is, and I would really like to know the panel's view. It came up several times. Is honestly, I think actually, my personal feeling is that things got worse in the last 10 years. When I entered workforce, I was actually starting out in the academic sector before moving to business. We always tried, to have panels where at least a woman would be. This was really, you could not have, in the 90s, a panel at any conference with only men. Now I'm sitting through days and days of panels where they have a female moderator, probably, but otherwise, they have all panel, everybody on the panel is married. And they also don't have, when I usually ask the question, could you really not find a woman? Oh, well, yeah, no, we couldn't. There was also not that much effort, and I see also in the business world, actually there's, at least in the country I come from Germany, there has very, very little has changed. In the company I was working in for 10 years, 20 years ago they had 50% of the directors were female, and they still are. And there's a lot of lower women coming up, but then there's the ceiling, and they're just out.
So
I would just very much like to hear your view on that.
Do we share that view? We heard about optimism, and we heard about that some of the areas that are changing, and some of the things that are now going unrecognised, perhaps in a different way. Do we share this view, or how do you feel about that? Who wants to come in?
Yeah,
Inez?
absolutely. Well, I think that there are also diversity. There are diversity because I'm married with a German, and I remember that when we started in Spain before coming in the Union. We were in our movements in favor of rights for women, and then we were just looking for the active women, and then I discovered, and I remember that there was I couldn't understand it. Then when I had my own daughters coming from my husband, I understood that women in Germany were abandoning the working place when they get pregnant, because culturally there was a big pressure, and the big pressure is also accompanied by no services at all. There were no kindergarten, no public kindergarten, which for us it was the first step. Completely different than in France. In France it was all women were active, and they were all the systems in order to keep children in in public schools or or at home, but with a system, a public system, and not in Germany. And then I realized my young daughters from my husband, they were just pregnant, and they just stopped, and they couldn't understand because and this was all the culture was accompanying this and helping them to see that a woman is responsible, very responsible of children, and then if it's not just 100% for children, is a problem. And this is also something I think that at the political level we are not able to take by the horns, which is that Europe is making less and less children. Sweden had a very aggressive politics in favor of helping and giving all the system, all the family, not only women but also men, the capacity and possibility to have children, because this is a problem of society, it's not only a problem of women. And in France also there were a moment of public policies in order to help the family, men and women, to have to. But now with all this austerity policy. Now the first victims have been women because of the public services. Yes, the less school from 0 to 3, which are the very most important service in order to have, how to say, the social change and also the gender change. From 0 to 3, if children can go to a public school, école publique, then is one of the guarantees that they will go better. But it is true. I'm also having the same in Spain. I wanted just to make the example. I have a vice president in the government who is a powerful woman, and a president, for example, of Castilla y León, who is also the head of the EPP in Spain. They are both very strongful women. They can decide on our lives and jobs, for example, but they cannot decide on their maternity because of a new law, which is just putting backwards all the freedom and the possibilities we had before. You see, that is, I would say, you are right. If we are not able to protect what we have and to defend what we have, it is true. And
so we've identified two sorts of pressures there. You're talking about the social and political vigilance that you mentioned in the outset, and the pressures around the economic pressures. Elizabeth talked a little bit about the younger generation wanting slightly different things. And how are you experiencing that, Muriel, inside companies? Is it also a pessimistic picture, or do you feel progress?
No, I won't say I'm a pessimist. I'm an optimist lady, firstly. But I think the answer is depending on where you look at and on which level you look at. Because in many countries, population is aging. So if you look at Japan, they need to empower more women because of an economic issue. If you look at other countries, even like France, I mean 10, 15 years ago, who was talking about parental leave? And who was talking about these issues, how to share the family between men and women? It was a women issues. If you look at many emerging countries, and I say that again, but I really feel that each time I'm visiting China, Pakistan, India, the girls are on the top of the universities. They will come to the market, they will do the business, and they will create their own entrepreneurship company. So they will work, and they will have the power, and they want to have the power. The last time I was in Karachi, in Pakistan, the girls of 18, 19 years old told me we want to be independent from our husband, from our father, from our brother, from the man. So they want, and they will do it. If you go back to Russia, that is a way back, because of the religion, because of the orthodoxy, who said to women, go back home and have 3 children. And Putin is not giving any rights to women. He doesn't care of that. So it depends on what level you look at and on what issues you look at.
So don't genericize.
We can't. But really, what I see is that it's what a Chinese artist, 50 years old, told me months ago. He said, you know, I'm an old man and I think we are very different, men and women. But you know, men, they should wake up. Otherwise, they will be, I mean, women are taking the world in their hands. I think he's right.
You know what would be interesting, just before I see if Elizabeth wants to chip in, just let's do a show of hands. Who feels, I mean, it's going to be a general question, but who feels broadly in their sphere more positive about progress of women, and who feels more negative? So let's do positive first.
No, but don't see that they are positive or negative. They have positive or negative points, because it's not. I see very smiling women. I don't think that they are negative, but only they have negative.
How do you experience it as a more positive? Sorry, I'll rephrase the question.
Sorry.
Do you see it as a more? Do you see progress more positively,
Yes.
or if you do progress? Okay, and people who feel we're actually sort of taking a step backwards. It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, Elizabeth, I don't know, is there anything that research can tell us and shed a light on that?
Well, I'm not sure that research can give us the answer for these complex questions, because we look at different instances where specific dynamics influence an outcome. Right, so there's no one size fits all. But what I have seen is clearly that gender equality is not something that happens automatically. Right, so it's not something that just emerges. It is something that people have to actively shape and craft to happen. And that's how we can avoid the danger of saying, oh, it's so different in different contexts, is to say, well, what unites those different contexts is actually to say, that they all need to have, maybe different measures for success, but they need some activity in order to ensure that we are not falling backwards and actually progressing on these important issues.
So let's just talk, shall we, a little bit about how do we craft that society? There must be specific things that you've experienced working within business, within the political world, again, that you've seen through talking to wide groups of people through your book. What are the how-tos? Are there things that that you would say can help craft that balance that we're looking for? Yeah.
I think that is really leading to this idea of best practice, isn't it? Is there any best practice we can just share? And as an academic, I'm feeling always slightly uneasy about best practice, because very often what we point out as best practice turns out to be not good in every single context. So what I refer to in my work are signature practices, is to say what works in a specific circumstance, what works in specific settings particularly well. And when I work with companies as well as other stakeholders, I always try to encourage them to find solutions that work for them, because particularly in the corporate world, and Maria will know that there's this danger of jumping on the bandwagon of initiatives. I see my competitor is doing something, I do the same thing, even though it might not be the right thing. So it's a bit of kind of thought about what you're trying to do. And there are various examples of how this good practice or the signature practices can look like, but what is really the key is that it needs to speak to the unique challenge that you try to achieve. So if you have a particular problem, having just a women's mentoring program is not going to sort that out, right? So we have been through the ways of having women mentored and so on and so forth, and we know that this in itself will not help. And there has been more recently the surge in looking at sponsoring effects. I'm not sure if people are familiar with sponsoring. So mentoring is basically just passing advice from one person to another, often in a hierarchical relationship, so senior person to more junior person, but that's where the relationship ends. With sponsorship, what you actually do is to promote this person actively. So you might sit in an actual promotion meeting and would fight the corner of this particular person if the person can't be in there. And what research has actually shown is that women do have more mentoring relationships. So the statement was that women are over-mentored. There's so many people giving them advice, but they're actually under-sponsored. There's nobody who sits in those important meetings and plays the chips on their behalf. Right? And I think this is a type of dynamic that I see in the corporate sector being encouraged, and that seems to work incredibly well, looking at the political dimension of business in a sense. Yeah.
Does that ring true, Muriel?
Well, I agree with you, there is no one answer. For example, I started to create a women network at Mazar, and it never works. And I know many of my friends who are very happy with their business women network. So, okay, I decided to leave it and to find another way to do things. But we need legal requirements, because the law will help the companies to improve. Look at the quotas in France. So we need law requirements. We need corporate guidelines. We need coaching for women, but also training for men and women. Because what you mentioned about Generation Y, it's true that for them, mixity is obvious. We organized a lunch at Mazar for parental leave. It was crowded of young people, not after 30. They were not there. and it was crowded by men and women because it's part of their life. So have this training for both genders about what it means to have a double career, to have a family, to have a work-life balance. It's very important. To have role model also, but it's not enough because sometimes you find that older women are not keen to help younger women. And I face that also in my company. I've done it, I don't want to help any other young women. If I've done it, it's possible to do it. So we have also to convince women to help the others. So I think many things will contribute, and it's why we need to work with politics, not only one business or one political only.
Inez, that's the perfect. How would you see it from the political point of view?
Yes, I think that you are so right. We need a political framework, I mean the law that accompany and to pursue, but the law by itself is not enough. We need because laws are there, but we need to implement them, and then we need also not to forget what we did in the past. I mean that cooperation among women, which are, for example, association of entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs, is a good thing. But at the same time, sometimes they feel like as they are together, men are not interested in these elements. Then I think that you mentioned two things that were really important. The role of men now, that because we've developed our values, normally the entrepreneurship world has taken them, communication, social care, but empathy. They are all our values, which were our cultural values as women to survive in our societies. They were taken by, but they didn't pay, how say, the price. That okay, yes, took them and developed for the world, but not for the women. Then I think that we need to still to cooperate and to associate, but also to prepare something also for the change of men, which is something we haven't seen, because the system in all with all individualism and this aggressivity for going up and not capacity to take those who are under us, which was also part, is something that has also played a role against women, and as you said, that all women and young women. This is for me is hard very much, because this is something that in my generation that we were fighting, or when we saw new young women arriving to our fight with different, for example, the feminine phenomenon, which I respect and support absolutely, because there are different ways of doing the same we did. I mean, that fighting for our freedom and liberties and rights, but in a different form. First, I saw my sisters in the party and in the associations. They are this, and this is something that is a big risk for us to switch apart young generation and old generation. And for that old generation, we are more responsible because we know how to deal with that, and I think that's important. Then, how is the role for men in all this world, and now by law trying to get how to change also their view, their behavior, their capacity and possibility to do better for them and for us also. And second, this gap generation between old women who were fighting, and then we did all, and now the young women, they don't recognize. No, I think that we need also to change our mentality to accept that young women have other views, which are as important or more for the future as ours. Then we need also to go with that. But I would like also to raise, I've read, and I would like to also to ask, on the capacity of women to accept some risk in the business issue. We are normally supposed not to accept the risk at the same level as men in some risky behavior, because I would like to understand how is this perceived by you, and also the fact that I've also read that in an enterprise or a business where it's more women, then is at least more than 18% of productivity more. I mean that it is very clear, and this is scientific now with the social science that more women mean better productivity and then better business. But I would like to understand if it's the case. And another issue, violence against women. This is also something that we thought, okay, with the rights and with the young people, they were all together, the mixity is okay, but violence against young women is still a terrible issue. And then also in the business, in the school, in the economic life, and I would like to understand if there are some elements that would just help us.
Maybe I can get Muriel to respond quickly to that question. And I'm just looking around. Has anybody got a burning question? Put your hands up, otherwise we're going to come straight in here. Okay, can we just take an answer to Inez's question and then come to you? Please, Muriel.
Well, there are many questions in one, so I don't know if I'm going to answer everyone. I think about the risky behavior. I think it's a behavior that men and women can have.
Absolutely.
And one point, I think in a business, it's not so easy to be risky, because we are in a country or in a continent in which when you fail, you are not supported, you are not granted, and so people are afraid to fail, and so you don't take any risk. So if you want to take risk, and that's for me not because you are a woman or because you are a man, it's because you are supported by your boss or your CEO, because you have an environment which is open to that, and that you said, okay, that was not a good idea, I failed, I'm going to have another one. Nobody will say hello, bye-bye. So for me, it's not a question of men and women. What is a question of men and women is more the confidence I have in myself. I feel I am able to do that. And we all know, and we're not going to spend any more time about that, because we know that it is one of our weakness, part of our education. So for me, it's again, the answer is education. And the women I interviewed in my first book, from 33 countries, had the same answer. We want to put all the money on the education of small children, before 10.
Interesting.
After it's too late.
To set the cultural
Before 10.
context.
Yes.
Just let me come to your question. Please tell us who you are.
Thank you. My name is Helena. I'm a journalist here in media. I want to say that I share the baby's opinion that I don't have the feeling that things are looking better for women today. I was not active on the labor market in the 90s, but I do see sexual objectification of women much more than I saw it 20 years ago. And I wanted to ask the panelists, what do you think about the role of the media in terms of handling the image of women outside in campaigns, in advertisement, but in the media in general, reality shows, for example. Shouldn't we start the education there?
Thank you. Let's talk about that. The role of the media. Very strong views, I think.
Terrible, terrible. I read a lot of newspapers and I buy a lot of media magazines, and I'm really afraid of the position of women in these magazines. And your role is very important. And you look at the advertising on the TV. Do you need a naked woman to buy a car? No. I mean, you can have beautiful people to buy a car without being naked. So things like that, I think are really terrific. But you said that you think things are going back. I think things don't go like that. It's like the sea. It's like that. And the men had built this world. They had it in their hands. They won't leave it to us like that. So probably they will fight for some of them to retain it, to keep it. And so we have to go on.
Exactly. If you just add a question, do you think that we need a law for this?
We need a law?
A law for
Control
controlling.
regulation of this.
to control the
Discrimination in media, basically.
law, for
Ah, so
advertising and all that.
Why don't we ask Ines?
Yeah, absolutely in favor that we need rules, because I think that we need also to see that this impression that some we have, if we look at some sectors and at some of the problems, that the risk of going backwards is very real. It's not only because the problem between men and women, but the problem of the whole society, which is now selling whatever with whatever. This is sometimes this is the problem. The media are no more independent, and then if they are not independent, it's very difficult that they don't compete for selling. And what the thing is, how could we just change this consumerism by other issues? And for me, it is clear that we need a law and again, to implement the law, we need also women association or women and men association, which are also fighting and very careful at that. This is also what we need. But you are right. Sometimes I feel when I see here in the airport running from one side to another, when I see all my colleagues from one moment, I think if all these men had now just to do the same, but with high heels, this is only my wish. I only want all these men to do exactly the same all the day, but with high heels. They will change their view, I'm sure.
Maybe we can have a European day, something like that. Elizabeth, you wanted to come in, and then I'm going to wrap things up.
I mean, I'm sorry that you feel it's going backwards. I'm also believes that yes, there are lots of things that the media is actually influencing, and we have lots of research evidence for that. And what we have seen in the last decade or so are two major trends: the rise of celebrity culture, which largely influences young people, that you don't need to be doing anything to be famous. And you know, your claim to famous is to be on reality television, and that becomes your aspiration in life. The second thing we have seen in the last 10 to 15 years is that, you know, it's no longer that women are only sexually objectified. We also see it increasingly with men, and that is then seen as a new equality is being achieved. So, and I think that is very rarely even theorized and discussed. And then there's a third thing, which is about journalists and how journalists are reporting. Which, you know, I mean, it is very, very evident if you speak to any female politicians, for instance, and Silvana Koch-Marin mentioned it, what questions you are being asked. You are asked about your children. You're constantly, you know, judged for what you're wearing and so on and so forth. So Angela Merkel in Germany, you know, when she was, you know, fighting for her first term in office, you know, it was only about the, you know, color of the outfit she was wearing and so on. And it's kind of, I think it's partly also the responsibility of journalists to think about the media images that they portray, and I think let go of some of the ideas of what their readers want to listen or read or whatever when they consume the news in some shape or form, right? Because I think there's a lot of transmitted knowledge which is no longer met by reality. I mean, you see that with journalism losing also a bit, you know, of the status, because now everyone can have a platform on Twitter and the like. Right? So yeah.
No, I mean, I think that's a whole topic in itself that we can debate for a long time. I think we're coming to the end of our time, so what I wanted to do is just maybe collect a few thoughts that have sort of come out during the discussion, and then put one final question to each of our panelists. I mean, it seems to me that what we've been hearing is a time which is changing a lot, when, you know, the old view perhaps of how to progress is changing because of a number of different pressures: the social pressures, the economic crisis pressures, the changes in the demographics and in the attitudes of the Generation Y, the changes that have now come through in terms of the men's perception of women and what it is that we're actually after a period when this has become a much more public and discussed topic. And so with all that change going on, and I thought Muriel's sea change, you know, and not a straight line in terms of progress, but up and down, and some setbacks and some move forwards. with all that in mind, and given that the topic of this discussion was women of influence, how to become and foster women of influence in these two different spheres, maybe that's the question to put to the panel. Just very briefly to sum up, if there's one thing that could be done to move this agenda forward and to create these women of influence who will change the debate, what would be that one thing that you would want to have happen? What could be the most important action? Who wants to start? It's a tough question. One thing. You've only got a minute, so it's got to be one thing. Imagine it's a tweet. That was somebody told me. If you're ever trying to wrap things up quickly, ask people, what would you say in a tweet? Ines.
Coming from a trade union background, equal pay.
Equal pay.
Yeah, but really, really equal pay. For me, that was big. If I cannot say the child education, but equal pay, that would be a revolution.
For me, if you can change one thing, then if you see that there's some unconscious bias at play, so that the male colleague, for instance, gets an interesting job or whatever, or the job that might help him to climb the ladder, just raise awareness, not necessarily for yourself, but for people around you, and just draw awareness to that this is happening. And I think if you all do that, this can have an important effect.
I would say that we need to change our mind, women, ourselves, and we also need to look at what Europe has done for us. Because someone asked me today, when did you start to be feminist? When I started to travel all over the world, and when I discovered that, I was very happy to be born in France after the 60s, and to have been able to be fully free of my life. And we can't realize how lucky we feel when you travel. So I think first we have to realize that Europe has done that for us. And that's important, and that's why I'm a member of the European Association now, Citoyenne pour l'Europe. And then to change our mind. We are able to do everything. That's just what we have to keep in mind every day.
A really different range of views, and I guess that's the beauty of this. Actually, it's going to be a bit of all these things, isn't it? But thank you all very much for making the trek over from the other building. I hope you will find your way back to the final session. And I just wanted to say a big thank you to our three panelists.
Merci.